Greetings, members one and all of the Salivation Nation. Most of us know what silver and gold do in times of hyperinflation. But what about times of austerity? Let's explore. Yes, this idea was sent to me by one Cleocatra, and I think it's a fascinating topic indeed. And I've been thinking about this for quite a while, and there's a lot to explore here because gold and silver really do what they do best in times of economic instability. But most of us think about economic instability in the form of, a hyperinflation type scenario or an economic recession or depression, where confidence in the banking system and the dollar and in our government really falls below the normalcy. And there is another aspect, though, to it that needs to be explored. But before we do that, let's talk a little bit about money. And what you see here is a collection of foreign coins from different places around the world. And of course, we remember back there was a time when gold and silver were in circulating coins of in various nations around the world, and it was used as money, and it was backed by the metal content contained therein. And so when you have pieces like this, you're protected not only by the denomination that is inscribed therein on the coins, but also by the metal from which it contains. Here in the United States, we have a constitutional standard for gold and silver being used as money. And of course, that standard has long since gone. And so the times of using gold and silver as money in our nation and in every nation around the world, there's not a single nation around the world that uses silver or gold as money. But that being said, after that occurred, well, then you had clad, base money, clad everywhere, clad. All we see here is clad and aluminum in this case, very light coins. And of course, they try to make it appear to be that these particular coins have value by even making them golden in color. And but the thing is that really they are just worth the base metals that are contained therein in reality, even if their denominations are above that value. Some of them make them extra thick to appear heavy, to have that feeling that you're holding real value in your hand. But in reality, we're not fooled, and there is nothing backing these metals in coinage and obviously in paper money as well, other than fiat, by government decree. Not that there's anything wrong with that, by the way, because it is the currency of the age, and we have to have faith in that currency to a point, especially for those of us in this community where we use our fiat currencies to purchase precious metals. And so, with that being said, what happens during times of economic instability where there becomes a hyperinflation situation? Well, it happened in Germany back in the 20s. It also happened in Zimbabwe. There was massive hyperinflation where there was so much money being printed and by the government that it basically diluted the money supply, creating not nearly as much confidence in the value. And within days, we saw the price of bread and other necessities just skyrocket. And you needed literally wheelbarrows full of money to get these particular items. It happened in Zimbabwe in 2008. It was probably the most egregious example, but it's happening right now in Venezuela. And it's causing quite a problem. And of course, during those times, well, if you have gold or silver, bullion, they're worth quite a lot more. Because like this bread and necessities, milk and those other necessities, well, gold and silver are as such that they will also reflect the value by the same measure. So these are worth a whole lot more than they were as far as in terms of the currency's value. And they do what they're supposed to do in those cases. They maintain their value. But what happens then in the case of a situation like the nation of Greece, who in recent years has had to implement austerity measures? And austerity is defined as using extreme measures to curb deficit spending by the government, and it can be in the form of measures where they cut the currency supply greatly, raise taxes, and cut government benefits and services. And so, in cases where that is happening, then it becomes very difficult to be able to use the currency because it's in short supply, but it maintains its value pretty much stable to where it was. So it's not a matter of the faith in currency dying, it's a matter of getting a hold of it so that you can have services and or be able to spend it to be able to provide for the families. Typically, people's incomes, they've been chopped in half. Obviously, their retirement and savings and the like, bail-ins, all that kind of thing can happen and with austerity measures. And so, what happens to gold and silver during those times? Well, as you can probably guess, not a whole lot. Having these will not necessarily make your situation any better, but that is the case in hyperinflation as well. All they do is maintain their value. So I believe they actually do serve the same purpose in austerity measures as they do in hyperinflation measures. I think in neither case will they necessarily be used as a currency to trade back and forth, although I could see situations where they would be in some situations in both cases. But in the forms of austerity, if the more people that hold gold and silver, the more that it can be used as an exchange. But in reality, during times of austerity, you're going to have situations where it's beneficial to have held cash for times such as an austerity type situation. So as I've mentioned in a previous video, it's always good to have an emergency stash of cash around in your home or somewhere safe outside of the banking system so that you can have access to that liquidity when you need it. And that is very important, and obviously that would be one of the most beneficial things to happen during austerity measures. But sooner or later, if they continue, that cash supply could run short, and it may be very difficult to actually use or spend that money in certain cases. In the case of Greece, what they did is they had another currency that they used, time, and the time bank, so to speak. And it was basically trading services and time. For instance, you may commission an artist to paint a painting, and they trade that time for gardening. Obviously, things like that, and a bartering system. If you have 3 rolls of toilet paper, you can exchange it for a stick of, you can exchange it for toothpaste or what have you. Trading and bartering are obviously things that were done in Greece during that time, but also the time sharing for services as well could be done. Obviously, those things are very difficult to measure in terms of the value of time placed on a painting versus help with the garden and growing vegetables, which is why there needs to be a fungible system in place in time, because typically the time bank, it could change, its value could change over time, and it's very difficult to measure. So that's where gold and silver could come into play, but there needs to be enough of it in order to become fungible, and same as well as cash. And that is the problem in austerity, is typically there's a cash shortage, and typically the government's going to take as much as they can to keep solvent and that means the population will suffer in many cases. So it's always good to have some left out to where it can't be necessarily touched by the government. And so that's where, things like something of value, gold and silver, as long as it can be traded for cash, I think it's going to be the best value that gold and silver could share during that time. So I hope this video was helpful. Thanks again to Cleopatra for the inspiration for this. It's very interesting. Post your thoughts below about the system of austerity and how gold and silver can or maybe not be valuable during those times. And post your thoughts about hyperinflation as well. I would like to extend a multitude of gratitude, y'all, for watching, and encourage you to please rate, share, comment, and subscribe.